A traditional Canadian pastime is to be apathetic about Canada itself. In many ways, it's very much like most of the people who come to YouTube feel about me. But this has always bugged me. The Canadian stuff, not the YouTube thing. Well, maybe the YouTube thing too. Because our past, our present, and presumably our future is so much tied to the United States, it's easy to feel dwarfed by their presence. Even though we might be the Buster Keaton to their Charlie Chaplin, and that's a reference that's going to garner me a lot of views, we still do have a fascinating history. Canada is filled with a rich and challenging history. Let's talk about that. I was once like many, thinking that Canada was this safe vanilla choice, like chocolate ice cream. But instead I've discovered we are this bold flavor, like vanilla. Take Henry Hudson. Much of early Canadian history is filled with people who didn't really want to settle here. They saw it as an obstacle, not a destination. Henry Hudson was one of those explorers trying to find the Northwest Passage, a way for England to bypass having to go overland or around Africa in order to get to Asia. Hudson was a good enough navigator, but didn't really have what you would call people skills. When he decided that he was going to stay after a brutal winter, his crew mutinied on him and set him adrift into the bay that now shares his name. He was with his son, his young son, and a few crew members who were still loyal to him. He floated off into the mist, never to be seen again. It's debatable about what happened. I mean, he more than likely died, unless he's the Highlander. But there are some more reasonable theories about what may have transpired. Number one, he could have been found by a northern native tribe in Ontario and sold into slavery. It's also maybe possible, though probably not, that he was able to navigate to the Norwegian island Spitsbergen. There is a grave there marked Hudson. Whatever the fate, it wasn't happy. But you know what's unbelievable? No one was charged for the mutiny. Some of the conspirators died before they got back to England, but the Crown was a little bit more concerned with fighting that Northwest Passage and or gold. So some of the mutineers actually went back to Canada to search for the Northwest Passage and maybe to find Henry Hudson as well. Spoiler alert, they didn't. The moral is this: in Canada's early years, if your brash and narcissism didn't get you killed by the natives, the weather certainly would. How about this story? Do you know the link between the Canadian Maritime Provinces and the state of Louisiana? It's also not a happy tale. Acadia was a region of New France, which nowadays would take over parts of Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI. For years, they had remained completely neutral, neither interfering in France or England as they tried to conquer and settle the New World. But then, in 1755, quite the royal proclamation came out where it said that Acadians were non-citizens and told quite firmly to leave. In a matter of months, Acadia pretty much ceased to exist. Those who refused to leave were either imprisoned, some were actually sent back to England and put into internment camps. This stuff actually happened. And just to lay the groundwork here, this is people and their families who had lived there for over 100 years. So many chose to go south. They were Acadians in exile. Their descendants would be known as Cajuns. Finally, let's talk about the War of 1812. The United States really wanted to control all of North America. They'd had their revolution, they had their government, all the things that make a great Broadway musical, but now they wanted conquest. Contrary to what most Americans think, not everyone wants to be American, and that was definitely true for early Canadians. And mostly true for modern Canadians as well. Truth be told, they were still trying to make Upper Canada, basically Ontario, and Lower Canada, basically Quebec, play nice with one another, but they had no desire to join the United Colonies. Now, I'm not going to go into specifics right this second, but there does seem to be some disagreement about who won the War of 1812. Certainly, you can make the case that America didn't. They absolutely did not achieve the goal that they set out to do, which was to conquer Canada. But they also sort of won. After all the treaties were signed, they were able to push westward and expand their empire. It's hard to say with that amount of land given to you that you would be looked at as a loser. Really, if anyone was marking up a scorecard, it would look like this. The Americans won, the Canadians broke even, and the natives, as they so often do, lost. Natives were no longer looked as being needed as allies, and so Canadians, Americans, and Europeans, either by brute force, deception, or just indifference, just took what they needed. Like I said, Canadian history is not boring. It might be presented as such, but there are great and intriguing stories to tell. On July 1st of this year, 2017, Canada celebrates its 150th birthday, and in honor of that, I'm going to be presenting a mini-series on Canadian history so I can delve into this in greater detail. So expect a mini-series in about April or May, and hold me to that. So if you're new here, hello, my name is Kyle. I upload videos every Monday and Thursday. I also have a podcast called Whatever This Is, which you can find a link to in the description below. There's also a Patreon page that you can go and support. Subscribe, there's a bell that you can click on to be notified of things that happen. There's stuff below, just look at the stuff below. I'm telling you, Canadian history is fascinating. I got really jazzed about this at a pretty early age in a junior high when I had this great teacher present to me the history of the Canadian Railroad, of all things, but it had all of the elements of a great story, a great novel, or a great movie. Bizarre characters, a country in crisis, a crazy dream. I can't wait to tell you about it, he said deceptively as he fades into black.